Okay, let's unpack this. We are doing a deep dive today into a question that, it goes straight to the heart of belief and action.
Mhm.
What does it actually take to embody a philosophy, a belief system, beyond just checking off a list of rules?
And more importantly, how far can that rigorous self-discipline really take you before you just hit a wall?
Exactly. It's that difference, isn't it? The difference between just outward performance and a true internal transformation.
It is. And the source we're looking at today sets an unbelievably high bar for what that outward performance looks like. And then after all that, it just declares it, well, utterly insufficient.
So our source is Sermon 2, The Almost Christian. It was preached way back on July 25th, 1741 at St. Mary's, Oxford.
Oh.
And it's all based on that really famous biblical quote where King Agrippa says to Paul, "Almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian."
Right. And the author just latches onto that word, almost. From the very first line, he says the core problem is that so many people go this far. They're almost persuaded. But going only thus far, he says, it avails nothing before God.
Okay.
So this entire text is a deep, really rigorous attempt to define that gap.
So our mission today is to follow the sermon's two big questions. First, we have to understand what it even means to be almost a Christian, which is a
Yeah.
huge amount of discipline. And then second, what are the radical interior changes required to be altogether one?
Yeah, and the goal for you listening is to really grasp this historical definition of what looks like moral perfection, and then to see why the author insists that even meeting that standard, this absolute peak of human conduct, is surprisingly just not enough to get you across the finish line.
Let's jump right in then. Part one, what is an almost Christian? It turns out this state, the one that the author says fails to save you, actually has three incredibly demanding parts. And the first one, the absolute baseline, is what the source calls heathen honesty.
I think that name itself is the first major insight. He's doing it on purpose. He's linking this baseline morality not to some high Christian virtue, but to what common heathens expected one of another.
So he's challenging his Christian audience from the start.
Completely. He's saying, look, if you can't even clear this bar, you haven't even achieved, basic human decency, forget anything else.
That's a sharp rhetorical move. It really is.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are the pillars of this basic pagan level honesty?
Okay, so the first is justice. And this means actively avoiding all forms of injustice. So no robbery, no theft, no oppressing the poor, no extortion, no cheating, no defrauding anyone of their rights. And then he adds this little practical hammer blow.
Yeah.
If at all possible, you must owe no man anything.
Wow, wait. Owe no man anything. That's a huge financial and ethical commitment on its own. What's the second pillar?
Truth. And this goes way beyond just, not lying under oath. It includes hating slander, false accusations, and any kind of willful lying.
And the language is so intense here. It calls liars the disgrace of humankind and the pests of society. It makes just basic honesty sound like the civic duty to stop society from collapsing.
It does. And the final piece of this baseline is assistance or love. This means helping others when it doesn't hurt you.
Yeah.
So, feeding the hungry if you have extra food, clothing the naked with your spare clothes, giving things that you truly don't need yourself.
Okay, so the absolute floor for being almost a Christian is be perfectly honest, debt-free, truthful, and generous with your surplus. That's already a massive moral lift, but that's just the beginning. Now we get to requirement 2, the form of godliness. This is having the outside of a real Christian.
Right, and this is where the standard shifts from sort of universal ethics to very specific religious discipline.
Yeah.
The author lays out this totalizing ethical environment. It's not just your actions, it's your words, your looks, how you present yourself. Everything is under scrutiny.
Let's talk about the rigor here, because the list of things to avoid is just stunningly comprehensive.
It is. So the almost Christian avoids taking God's name in vain, avoids cursing, avoids profaning the Lord's day. But then he goes so much deeper. He says you have to avoid not just adultery or fornication, but every word or look that either directly or indirectly tends thereto.
So that's not just action anymore, that's impulse control. But the thing that really stood out to me was the ban on idle words.
Yeah.
He forbids backbiting, foolish talk even jesting. Why is simple conversation policed so strictly?
Because for this worldview, for this level of piety, your life has to be demonstrably serious. Every moment counts. Idle words, they show a lack of seriousness. They show disrespect for the time you've been given. It's the same reason they have to avoid excess wine or reveling or gluttony.
Yeah.
Anything that hints at uncontrolled pleasure is out.
And they have to avoid all strife, contention, revenge, returning evil for evil. The rule's just to try and live peaceably.
But it's not just about avoiding bad things. It requires positive action, too. The almost Christian does good, all manner of good to all men. Friends, enemies, everybody. They're active in helping souls, not just bodies. So reproving the wicked, instructing the ignorant, comforting people. It's a full-time moral job.
And all of this has to be supported by the constant and careful use of the means of grace. And he gets so specific about how you have to do your religious duties.
Exactly. It's a protocol. It's not just about showing up. When you go to the house of God, you have to be serious. No gaudy vanity of dress, no gazing around, no sleeping, no talking.
Right. And at the communion table, your whole demeanor has to basically scream, God be merciful to me, a sinner. It's an all-encompassing lifestyle design, not just a Sunday thing.
Absolutely. So what you see in this first part is that being almost Christian is defined by this peak of human self-discipline. And yet, this is where we get to the third requirement, which kind of pulls the rug out from the first two.
Here's where it gets really interesting and, frankly, a bit shocking. Everything we've just described, the perfect justice, the total behavioral control, the rigorous religious protocol, none of it is enough without requirement 3. Sincerity, the inward principle.
Sincerity is defined as a real inward principle of religion that makes the outward actions flow. It's a real design to serve God, a hearty desire to do his will. The person isn't just acting. They genuinely believe what they're doing is to please God.
But he's so careful here. He says without sincerity, you don't even meet the standard of basic heathen honesty. If you're only good to avoid getting in trouble, the pagan test, then you're not actually a good person.
Exactly. The pagan says, if you only avoid crime so you shalt not be hanged, then, okay, there thou hast thy reward, but you have no virtue. So sincerity is what stops the person from being a hypocrite. They are dedicated, disciplined, moral, and their intentions are genuine.
And this is the moment the whole sermon just pivots. It asks, point blank, is it possible to go this far, to achieve all of that, and still only be almost a Christian?
And the author answers with his own personal testimony. He says he's going to declare his own folly upon the housetop. He confesses that he himself went this far for many years. He was diligent, he used all the means of grace, he did it all in sincerity, with a real design to serve God.
And that's the twist. He's telling you, the listener, that outward perfection and genuine good intentions are the absolute limit of human effort, and in his own experience, it was not enough.
Precisely. It completely removes the comfort of self-reliance. If that incredible level of discipline with a pure heart is still just almost, then we have to ask what comes next. Which brings us to part 2. What must be internally present to be altogether a Christian?
Part 2 moves completely away from conduct and into internal transformation. And the first requirement, beyond even sincerity, is the love of God. The citation is, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind and with all thy strength.
And this love has to be total. It's not just affection or respect. The source says it engrosses the whole heart. It fills the entire capacity of the soul. It's not partial devotion. It is total absorption.
So if that love completely fills the heart, what's the result? I mean, what does that person look like? What are they dead to?
They must be crucified to the world. So, dead to the desire of the flesh, the desire of the eye, the pride of life. And crucially, this kind of love makes one dead to pride of every kind. It makes a person less than nothing in his own eyes. The author argues that if you still have pride, you simply cannot possess this love.
That humility requirement it's monumental. Which leads right into the second great internal requirement, the love of our neighbor. The rule, of course, being love thy neighbor as thyself.
But the definition of neighbor here is about as radical as it gets. A neighbor is every man in the world, and that explicitly includes our enemies and even the enemies of God. And the command is to love them as Christ loved us, which just elevates the standard beyond normal human capability.
That isn't just moral advice. That's a state of being that requires you to suspend, basic human self-preservation. If you love an enemy as yourself, you would actively want what's best for them.
Exactly. And the metric he uses is St. Paul's description of love. This love has to be long-suffering and kind. It can't be envious, it's not rash or hasty. It seeks not her own. And this part is key. This love is not provoked. It thinketh no evil. It covereth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things.
The implication is so clear. If you get easily provoked, if you hold a grudge, if you put yourself first, you just don't have this transformative love. But how? I mean, how does a person even achieve that suspension of human nature? Which brings us to the final and most important requirement, faith.
Yes, and this is the critical theological engine that drives the whole internal transformation. And the author makes this incredibly sharp distinction, it's really the crux of the whole sermon, between what he calls a dead and devilish faith and the right and true Christian faith.
Okay, let's break that down. The dead faith first. What is that? What's that insufficient belief?
The dead faith is purely intellectual. It's just believing the historical and theological facts. You believe Christ was born, did miracles, died, rose again, and will come back to judge. You believe everything in the Bible is true.
And the crucial detail here is designed to shock the listener out of their comfort zone. He says that even the devils believe all of those articles of faith.
Yes, they have comprehensive theological knowledge. They are certain of the historical facts. But despite that belief, they remain still in their damnable estate. So just knowing the facts, even with total certainty, is not the right kind of faith.
So if the dead faith is believing the facts, what is the right and true Christian faith? What's the real difference?
True faith isn't knowledge, it's trust, it's confidence. The source defines it as a sure trust and confidence that you will be saved from damnation through Christ's merits. It's a deep, personal confidence that your own sins are forgiven and that you are reconciled to God.
So it's the difference between believing a parachute exists and actually putting one on and jumping out of the plane. It's an act of total reliance.
And the result of that reliance is the final, undeniable proof. This specific kind of faith is the only thing that purifies the heart. Not human effort, not sincerity, but this trust. It cleanses the heart from pride, anger, selfish desire, all unrighteousness.
And we come full circle back to the main metric. This purifying faith works by love, a love that is stronger than death. It shows itself by glorying to spend and be spent for all people, enduring mockery, being despised, even hated, and doing it with joy. Whoever has that faith is not almost but altogether a Christian because their core self has been transformed.
Right. And so the author shows that the peak of self-discipline from part 1 and the genuine internal transformation from part 2 are just fundamentally different states, achieved by fundamentally different means.
So what does this all mean? The sermon is setting up this radical contrast. It challenges anyone who is relying on their own effort, outward compliance, that immense discipline of heathen honesty in the form of godliness, plus genuine good intentions. That is the absolute limit of what a human can do on their own. And you can do all of that and still be in a state of peril.
The truly Christian state, according to this analysis, requires an internal transformation. And that transformation is driven by this specific trust-based faith that purifies the heart and then manifests as this universal, long-suffering love for everyone. It moves the whole standard from external performance to internal reality.
And the sermon at the end turns directly to the listener, to you, and forces this really hard self-examination. Have you even achieved the baseline of heathen honesty? Have you met the rigorous demands of the form of godliness? And more crucially, is your heart actually filled with the love of God and neighbor, or do you just have good designs and desires?
And that leads us to the final provocative thought offered in the source. It's a powerful warning against relying on partial effort or just good intentions. As the author quotes someone else, "Hell is paved, saith one, with good intentions." The ultimate question he leaves you with is whether those good designs and desires are actually brought to good effect by this purifying faith that works through universal love.
A profound challenge to consider where your own self-driven effort ends and where true internal transformation might begin.
Indeed. We'd encourage you to keep exploring the depth of your own sources and finding these kinds of powerful connections.
Until next time, keep digging deeper.